Imagine a world where a single sneeze could mean certain death. The Black Death wasn't just a plague, it was a nightmare that wiped out nearly half of Europe's population. But what if I told you it was even worse than you thought? Stay tuned to uncover the terrifying truths about history's deadliest pandemic. Curious about how this nightmare began? Let's travel back in time to uncover the origins of the Black Death and see how it spread like wildfire across continents. The Black Death, also known as the bubonic plague, is believed to have originated in the arid plains of Central Asia. It spread westward along the Silk Road and other trade routes, carried by fleas living on the black rats common on merchant ships. By the mid-14th century, the plague had reached the shores of Europe, forever altering the course of history. The first recorded outbreak of the Black Death in Europe occurred in 1347 when 12 Genoese trading ships docked at the Sicilian port of Messina. The ships were filled with dead and dying sailors, their bodies covered in black boils that oozed blood and pus. The disease spread like wildfire, moving from port to port, city to city, leaving a trail of death in its wake. From Italy, the plague spread rapidly across Europe, reaching France, Spain, Portugal, and England by 1348. It continued to move north and east, devastating Germany, Scandinavia, and eventually Russia. The speed at which the Black Death spread was unprecedented, facilitated by the movement of people and goods along well-established trade routes. But what made the Black Death so deadly? The answer lies in the nature of the disease itself. The plague was caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, which could infect humans in 3 different forms: bubonic, pneumonic, and septicemic.
It's caused by a bacterium, which is called Yersinia pestis. The bacterium evolved actually from a harmless, non-pathogenic bacterium that normally lives in the soil. But the pathogenic Yersinia pestis is spread by fleas, which in turn are spread by rats. It's believed that the rats moved around on ships as part of trade at the time in medieval Europe.
Each form was deadly in its own right, but together, they created a perfect storm of death and despair. Understanding where the Black Death came from is just the beginning. To truly grasp the horror of this pandemic, we need to look at the symptoms and how the disease spread with such devastating speed. The Black Death was notorious for its horrifying symptoms, which varied depending on the form of the plague. The most common form, bubonic plague, began with a sudden onset of fever, chills, and headaches. The most distinctive symptom was the appearance of painful, swollen lymph nodes, known as buboes, which could grow as large as an egg and turn black due to internal bleeding. As the disease progressed, victims would experience severe fatigue, muscle aches, and delirium. In many cases, the infection would spread to the bloodstream, leading to septicemic plague. This form of the disease causes skin and other tissues to turn black and die, especially on the fingers, toes, and nose. The pneumonic form of the plague was even more terrifying. It attacked the lungs, causing violent coughing, chest pain, and bloody sputum. Pneumonic plague was highly contagious, spreading through airborne droplets when an infected person coughed or sneezed. Without treatment, it was almost always fatal within 48 hours. The speed at which the Black Death spread was unprecedented. Infected fleas would bite humans, transferring the Yersinia pestis bacterium into their bloodstream. The disease could also spread through direct contact with bodily fluids or contaminated materials. As people fled from infected areas, they unknowingly carried the plague with them, spreading it to new regions. Medieval cities, with their crowded and unsanitary conditions, were perfect breeding grounds for the plague. The lack of medical knowledge and effective treatments only worsened the situation. People resorted to desperate measures, such as bloodletting and the use of herbal remedies, but these were largely ineffective against the deadly bacterium. Think the symptoms were horrifying? Wait until you hear about the staggering death toll and the devastating impact on Europe's population. The numbers are beyond belief. The Black Death's impact on Europe's population was nothing short of catastrophic. Between 1347 and 1351, the plague killed an estimated 25 to 50 million people.
Killing, we now believe, and the records are very good, up to half of the population, 1 in 2 of the population, in the space of 7 years.
Entire towns and villages were decimated, and the sheer scale of death was unprecedented. The massive loss of life had profound economic and social consequences. With so many people dead, labor became scarce, leading to a dramatic shift in the balance of power between the peasantry and the nobility. Surviving workers found themselves in higher demand, which allowed them to demand better wages and working conditions. The sudden drop in population also led to a surplus of goods and a decline in prices. Landowners, desperate to maintain their estates, began offering more favorable terms to tenants. This shift contributed to the gradual erosion of the feudal system and the rise of a more market-based economy. Beyond the economy, the Black Death left a deep scar on culture and religion. The pandemic changed the way people viewed the world and their faith, leading to profound shifts in society. Hysteria gripped the population. People turned to extreme measures to protect themselves, including the persecution of marginalized groups. Jews in particular were scapegoated and accused of poisoning wells, leading to violent pogroms and massacres. Additionally, the plague brought about a breakdown in social order. With so many dead, essential services collapsed. There were reports of abandoned children, unharvested crops, and entire villages left to decay. The sheer scale of the disaster overwhelmed existing social structures, leading to a period of chaos and anarchy. The immediate horrors of the Black Death were devastating, but its long-term effects were equally transformative. The pandemic reshaped the world in lasting ways. One of the most significant impacts was the demographic shift. With a drastically reduced population, Europe experienced a labor shortage that led to higher wages and better working conditions for surviving workers. This shift helped to weaken the feudal system and paved the way for the rise of a more modern economy. The Black Death also had a profound impact on religion. The Church's inability to provide answers or relief during the crisis led to a decline in its authority. This disillusionment with the Church contributed to the questioning of religious and societal norms, setting the stage for the Reformation and the eventual rise of secularism in Europe. Finally, the Black Death had lasting effects on public health and urban planning. The need to control the spread of disease led to improvements in sanitation and the development of quarantine measures. These early public health initiatives laid the groundwork for modern practices in disease prevention and control. In summary, the Black Death was not just a catastrophic event in history, it was a turning point that reshaped European society in profound ways. Its long-term effects can still be seen today in our economic systems, cultural expressions, and the way we live. If you found this video informative, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more fascinating history facts.